Hi everyone, my name is Jonathan Beltran, and this is my inquiry number 4 with the topic of getting students to share their thinking. So my young student in the previous video that you watched, I called him over, he offered to volunteer to help me, and had objects laid out. We know what they were, different shapes, they had magnets in them, and the student then proceeded to grab them and put them together as he normally does and would play with them in centers. Now, as I asked the questions, he took a little bit of time because he hadn't thought of it before, and I wanted to get his thinking on why they stick together. I had asked if they were magic because he had mentioned that he watched some Disney movies and there was magic in there, but it didn't correlate to a response from him. He just said no, just shrugged his shoulders. There was no audible response. And then I started asking him more very specific and direct questions. Well, why do these stick together? And after that, he said, he looked, he moved it, he put it together, he took it off, he set it down, and then he pointed to the metal piece. He said, magnets. And then he started sticking them to other parts of that. That's what he was doing in the video. As I watched, I noticed that where he wasn't really speaking, he was connecting them to different spots, and they all connected. And then I said, well, what else do they connect to? And then he came up with his own idea and said, the door. They connect to the door. So I wonder, a question that I could ask or should have asked maybe, well, how do you know? Have you done that before? And then we went over and put it to the door, and I asked, well, what's the door made of? And he said metal, something that I hadn't mentioned previously. I just asked what it sticks to, why it sticks to, and he said because of the magnets. And then he came up with his own inquiry and said magnets stick to metal. And then when I asked what do they not stick to, I gave him an object, which was the trash can, and it didn't stick. He fell down and he said, well, why doesn't it stick to that? Because it's a trash can, obviously. But then as I asked questions, and he said again, the door's metal, so is the trash can metal if it didn't stick? No, it's not made of metal. That's what I was trying to get him to think, because he knows it wouldn't stick to the trash can, but why? Sharing that response because it's not metal. And then when prompted to ask, he went over and stuck it to glass, and then it kind of was like, it didn't stick. And then he was looking for something else, and I offered him the frame, and it did. And then he said, oh, it stick to this because it's metal. So seeing that train of thought and thinking, we see it happen, but for the student to come up with their own words and tell us and tell me why, it's very cool. It's very interesting to see the train of thought. Sometimes students go off on a tangent, and it's not even remotely close, but it makes sense to them. And then we might have to correct their thinking a little and bring it back to reality with their wild imagination and what they have. So it's pretty interesting. That student, he is a bright student who knows his letters and numbers and letter sounds and all of that. So it would be interesting to try it with one of my students who is not at that level where he's at, and see the different responses I get. So definitely food for thought and a good inquiry on getting the students to share their thinking. This student definitely did share their thinking, and it was really insightful in the way that that student operates and thinks when he's playing with new tools.